I'd like to give a brief introduction of each of our candidates, and I want you to promise that you will look in the program and read the full introduction, okay? Because I'm going to be brief, but these are some really, really special, accomplished women. We have with us today Mayor Rosalind Bliss, community activist and political consultant, Ms. Danavia Moget, and the Honorable Judge Sarah Smolensky of the 63rd District Court. And I am also delighted to report that we are, during this conversation, live streaming from the mayor's Facebook page. Awesome. We thank her for that. So I have my general starter question here. There's a lot of debate in general. You know, are leaders born or made? How do they develop? So I was wondering, of our panelists, do you feel like you always knew you were a leader? You know, you were sort of born to be a leader, or was there some key experience or experiences that made you realize, hey, I am a leader?
I probably would say I always had an inkling that I would be a leader because I was a talker, not just because you're a talker, but in 4th grade, I really can say this. I knew in 4th grade I was going to be a lawyer. I wanted to be a lawyer. I decided that's it. And to me, that led to the path and the journey that enriched my leadership. Now, everybody's different in terms of their leadership, but I am so proud to be up here with these 3 women. And 40 years ago, I graduated from this great institution. 40 years ago. Yes, that's true. And I do think that it definitely, my experience here at CC helped shape, you know, the journey for being a leader. But yes, I was young. I was one of 10 kids. And yeah, I think that I always had an inkling that I'd be a leader. But I don't feel like I'm a leader like they're a leader. I think we're all different kinds of leaders. But that's my answer.
Mm-hmm. All right. I don't know if we're going in any particular
Ms.
order,
Moget?
but yeah, so I'm Danavia Moget, and I think for me, I'm one of 4. I was the oldest girl, and while there were always I guess I had a natural inclination to advocate for myself. And so when you have brothers or you're in a military family, a lot of times you have to speak up about what's going on, and my dad is all about hierarchy. And my dad was a sergeant in the Marines, and so he was all about someone taking responsibility at all times for everything going on, someone being able to be held accountable. And I think that's what naturally kind of made me a leader. You know, you hold yourself accountable for things, you speak for your siblings, and naturally that kind of cultivates those leadership traits. But I think for me, I kind of define leadership not necessarily as a role or any certain level of prestige. I think we're all leaders in some sense, now more than ever. Everyone has a Facebook page, and you can post something, and you can inform someone's opinion just by the post that you made. And I think leadership is influence, and everyone in this room has an influence over their respective sphere. And I think leadership in and of itself is just the willingness to be conscious of your influence and use it and wield it in a certain way. And so I think we all do it. I think I'm a leader, but I was probably cultivated into one. I think even if you don't feel like you're naturally born a leader, you can be put in circumstances that will definitely turn you into one. You know, I think when we're passionate enough, every single one of us would be a leader if we had to be. So
I love your phrase, a natural inclination to advocate for yourself. That is an awesome quality to have. Right. Mayor Bliss?
Thank you. So since we're talking about family, Judge Smolensky and I share the same family. I'm actually from a family of 10 as well. Not the oldest, though. I'm number 7, so I have 6 brothers, and I'm kind of sandwiched in between them. So leadership, you know, it's really interesting. You know, this question reminds me of the question I always had when I was in college in psychology classes, the whole nature versus nurture argument and debate. And, you know, when I think about my own leadership, I heard a leader speak one time, and she considered herself an accidental leader. And I remember when she said that, that resonated with me. And I think back on my life and leadership roles that I stepped into. Very often, I ended up being in a leadership position because I care deeply about something. I'm pretty task-oriented. I'm very reliable, and I'm hardworking. And all of you who have volunteered or done any type of work, if you have a few of those qualities, people call on you a lot to do things. And so I think back, and when I was in college, I ended up being the president of Psychi. And when I was working, I almost always moved into a manager position relatively quickly. I'm good with numbers, I'm detail oriented, and I think that kind of leads you into kind of this more leadership track or administrative track, at least in my field. So my background is social work, and I'm no longer at Dave Lodge at St. John's, but when I was there, I was the director, again in a leadership role. And so I think it's probably a mix of both. I think I probably have a number of traits that help me be a leader. But I think when I was growing up, I definitely in fourth grade did not think of myself as a leader. In college, I don't think I saw myself as a leader. And quite frankly, I'm not even sure I would have stepped up to run for office had it not been for other people encouraging me and seeing leadership skills in me that I honestly don't even think I saw in myself. I think I've done things because I care deeply about them, and very often, when you're passionate about something, you end up leading on it. But I wouldn't necessarily say that I was born a leader. I think those are skills that I acquired over time from a lot of people and a lot of experiences. And I'm really grateful to be in a position today where I'm able to lead on, again, issues that I care very deeply about.
So what I'm hearing is a combination of both, some natural tendencies, some natural traits, but also people along the way who encourage you and finding what you really love to do. Those things being very important. Can you each talk about maybe a fairly early experience in your life where you were sort of thrust into a leadership position and it was new and you thought, I can do this. I can do this. An early experience that might be key in your leadership development?
Well, I'll start by saying that athletics were always a lot of my life. So through school, even back when I was in high school, they didn't have athletics for all the girls' sports until I was a junior in high school. But I look back and I played here at Grand Rapids Junior College on the basketball and softball teams. And at the junior college level, we actually, even traveled and went as far as a national tournament when I was here all the way to Texas. I bring up my athletic career because I think that helped mold my leadership skills when you're in a team of 12 or 14 young women where they're looking for a leader in that. Not, maybe if you get to be a senior level, you're a captain or something, but I don't think that everybody has experiences that lend themselves, and I do think we're leaders in different ways. I really, when I sit up here, I don't think of myself like a leader like Rosalind Bliss. Part of the leadership of my role is I'm a judge. I wear a robe. People stand up when I come in the room. I mean, that's part of my job. It's not because I'm so special. It's not because Sarah's so great. Really, you could be lousy at it. You don't want to be lousy at it, but that doesn't make you a leader. It's the qualities that you have with each job you have. I think that early on, athletics helped mold my leadership skills by being a leader. I always felt like it was so important to speak for people who could not speak for themselves. And I remember in fourth grade, it was a kid who couldn't read out loud. He could read. He's probably smarter than I ever was. Or will be, that kid. He's probably working with Amy King at Shape right now because I heard her presentation and it was off the chart. She's unbelievable. But when you're talking about helping someone, that kid was afraid to speak to a group. I must have been born an extrovert right out of my mother's womb because I love talking to a group of people. The more, the better. You know, I'm not nervous about it. I've never had to take Dale Carnegie. That doesn't make me a leader, probably more a talker. But when you stop, and I thought about that kid, I know the teacher wanted us all to read, but he was so panicked to read out loud. And it had nothing to do with, he was smart and sharp. He was just so introverted. It was painful. It was painful for him. And I thought, I want to be able to speak for him. Well, then the teacher didn't let me read for him. But, you know, I was showing my leader skills even at that stage to say I wanted to help. I think sometimes each one of us, when we've done something where we've had a passion and we've helped someone with whatever it is. Somebody in your neighborhood, somebody that needed a coat, somebody that needed help when they were moving, or you helped them with transportation. To me, that's a form of being a leader. It's not a leader that you come in a courtroom and you're judge. So part of being a judge is a leadership role, but I don't think every judge is a leader. So, you know, we find our qualities. And I think I did feel them at a young age, but I have been able to hone in on them and still work at trying to be a good leader. But there's so many different parts to being a good leader. First, you just got to be a good person. Just be a good person. Gosh, if we could all work on that, the leadership stuff would all fall into place. But just being a good person, helping others. I say I always try to smile at the man or woman at the grocery store because you don't know what kind of day they're having. And they might be a little snippy to you, but minute you start smiling and say, how's your day going? Really, how's it going? That's the kind of talker I am. You have people open up when normally they'd never even talk to you. I don't know where I went with that, but go with it.
We can
I'm
go
like, okay, I
anywhere
gotta
we
follow
want.
after that. All right.
Is the topic leadership?
We can go anywhere we want.
She's a talker. I like that. But when I think of my early experiences, I guess like you, I was always a talker too. I always had a lot to say, and I think when you're in a black family, it's like children should be seen but not heard. And I'm like, oh, you're gonna hear me. Like I was always talking, and so I was that kid. But I think as far as those experiences that kind of gave me leadership experience, it probably started for me in school. I think school was just a natural place where when you get in groups, I'm like, okay, guys, here's my idea. This is what we should do. Like, I'm that one when you guys get in a group, the first person to throw out an idea and then start to organize how we should make my idea happen. I was that kid. And then naturally what that turned into, I was a club starter. My brother, he's a Marine in Japan now, and he still makes fun of me for this. I started clubs all the time in high school. There was no club that I thought did not need to be made if I was interested in it. Even to the point where I started a Korean club in high school, and there were Korean kids in my school who were like, why did she start a Korean club? But I was really into K-pop. I was like, oh my gosh, my parents have the Comcast, like, Korean pop channel. I can watch their boy bands do music videos. I didn't speak a lick of Korean, but I knew all the sounds, and I just danced to it. And I went to school, and I'm like, can we start a Korean club? And my teacher was like, sure. And I was like, great. So I'll make the posters, and I'll pick a time, and I'll pick a classroom, I'll find an advisor, and I would do the work to mobilize around whatever I cared about. And then I felt like there wasn't enough school spirit, so I started a spirit committee, and we got free shirts for everyone in the school to wear. And like, that was just what I liked to do. I loved to lead on things that I cared about. And when it turned into a thing where other people felt like you've mentioned how oftentimes we don't really chase a leadership position, but more so we're thrust into one by people who feel like we need to be slid into this opportunity, came to be around in high school. I got kind of thrust into beauty pageants. And as a girl who did not wear heels, did not understand makeup, hair, no. Messy bun every day. Rollerblading after school and tree climbing were like, that's just my life. And I did, like, one of the clubs I participated in, I was a competitive speaker. So I used to compete in extemporaneous speech. I don't know if you guys do, like, forensics clubs or Business Professionals of America. I did all of them. And I used to travel and compete and speak. But those were, like, the only times that I would dress up, and there was nothing fabulous about that. But I'm from Benton Harbor, and it's a small, poor black community. And as one of those kids who was conscious of what was happening around in my community, and I was always talking to my parents about it. Like I said, I was a talker. So my mom would be trying to talk about what's going on at school. And I'm like, did you read that we're under emergency management? It's in the paper. And she's just like, you can't even vote. Like, what are you talking about? And so that was me, and my mom and a bunch of my friends were just like, there's this pageant, Miss Benton Harbor, you should run. And I was like, the girl who stands on the float at the parade every year? Yeah, nah, guys, good one. But they're like, no, like she goes to the city commission meetings. She like can speak all the time. You're a good speaker. For once, it should be a girl who just wants to be glamorous and glittery. And I was like, oh my God, no, they'll try and make me wear heels and sparkle. And so my mom forced me to go. Naturally, what she did was go get the application, fill it out for me, drop it off behind my back, and then pick me up for work, and then tell me, hey, we're at the Miss Benton Harbor practice, get out of the car. And I'm like, no. And that was literally how I ended up running for a pageant. I did not want to. I really was upset at her. But I went inside, and I realized that there was an opportunity to make a difference in my community. And I was like, how can I not at least try, right? And so I ended up winning. And even in that situation where they're like, great, now you're a leader, here are all the things we want you to say. I was like, ooh, I didn't know that's what I signed up for. You guys have an agenda? Oh, no, I don't do well with those. I'll tell you what I'm passionate about. And they're like, no. They're like, no, Miss Benton Harbor, you can't talk about whatever you want. Oh, really? Like, I mean, it's my mouth, right? And they're like, well, you can't just do that. I'm like, but I'm passionate about this and that. And so I literally kind of changed the whole nature of that pageant. I was probably the most political queen they had ever had. I mean, like, they're like, well, the Blossom Time pageant, the biggest pageant of the summer is, I'm like, oh, no, I'm in D.C. that weekend, can't make it. Like, I was that girl. And so that was kind of how leadership kind of molded me. And like I said, leadership is influence. And so naturally, I started as the night I won the first pageant, there were like 800 friend requests when I got home. And I was like, who are these people? Remove, right? Like, who are you? And my chairman's like, oh, no, honey, you're Miss Benton Harbor. You wear that crown. The city pays for that crown. You accept all those people. They're your constituents, and they want to know who you are. And I was like, oh, okay. But then what I realized was when I did make a poster, when I said something, everybody shared it. And I was like, ooh, so I'm not just going to post about sparkles and heels. We need to talk about this emergency management law. Like, we should, like, and so I was doing that at 16, 17, and I got a key to the city of Benton Harbor for work in that capacity. And so then I came to GRCC, I came here, and I decided I wanted to know what's going on downtown. I was volunteering on Mayor Rosalind Bliss's campaign. I just was like, I want to jump in and help people. And naturally, you become a leader. Today, I run a political radio show, and people tune in. Every time I post a video, it's over 1,000 views, and I talk about what matters. And then people say, you've led on so many issues. I'm passionate about equity and things. And so that's what the people who are under whatever influence I have know me to endorse. And so that's leadership.
Very cool. Mayor Bliss.
So an early experience I had, the first one that came to mind when you asked that question, I remember when I was in high school, and in my science class, I was learning about environmental issues, and I learned about styrofoam not being biodegradable. Sounds very boring, but I remember I went to lunch, and I saw that the school was using styrofoam. And I'm like, the school should not be using styrofoam. That's crazy. It's not biodegradable. It's not good for the earth. And so I started a petition at my school to get us to stop using styrofoam. And really, I was just wanting the school to change. Like, this is not good for this beautiful earth. And I'm a huge advocate for environmental issues and taking care of and being a good steward of this amazing, beautiful space that we've been given. And I remember the principal called me into his office and talked to me about budget and cost and, why they use styrofoam. And they didn't stop using styrofoam. I was kind of disappointed about that, so I started a Saturday cleanup where I'd get other students to come and help me clean up the sides of the road and pick up litter. But that was probably my very first kind of putting my toe into leadership and trying to create change. And really, it was just because I didn't think the school should use styrofoam, and I felt really compelled and strongly about that. And it was funny though, because even so, I've gone to a couple class reunions, and do you know that peers, students that I went to school with, they still remember that I did that. Even my senior of high school, in my yearbook, I was nominated as the most environmentally, conscious student. And it's funny, like it's amazing what people remember. And my hope is that that inspired other people to step up when they found something that they wanted to change. But that was probably my first experience of trying to create change using my influence. Yeah. It didn't work though.
Well, a theme I'm hearing is that leaders sort of come in, are of all kinds, at all levels, in all ways. But I'm also hearing courage as a theme. I would imagine it took a lot of courage to go to the principal's office with your petition and say, we don't, and I hope there's no styrofoam here. So now I'm getting a little nervous. But courage, and courage, Denavia, it's my mouth. In fact, I'm going to take that away from this gathering right now. The next time somebody wants me to say something, it's my mouth. It's my mouth. Yeah, that's great to end to say, hey, I can read for that kid. So the courage in the moment is really important.
Can I add something to that?
Please.
So I think in addition to courage, I think each of us, we have our own values and beliefs. And for me, I have this really strong belief, and it's actually my personal mantra in life. And I still say it to this day, and I know I said it then in high school during that, a little stint of trying to advocate for change. But my motto is, and I really fundamentally believe this, is that if there's a will, there's a way. And I think that's more than courage. I mean, it's a belief that, if we can figure it out, there's always a way to create change or to make things better. And if you truly have a will, if you are committed and you don't give up, then I really believe that you can create change. And so that's a little motto that I hang on to. That if there's a will, there's a way. And it's really amazing what you can do if you put your mind to something and if you refuse to give up. And if you're really open to getting to wherever you want to be by taking a different path. I don't know. Very often when I say I want to work on something, I have no idea how I'm going to get there. I don't even know the best path to get there. I just want to know what I want to see different. And I'm pretty open to how we get there. And I often say that I don't care how we get there, as long as we get there together. One, we don't leave people behind, and with that we create true change. And I think if you're open to that, to being open to new ideas, and you're really committed to sticking with something and not giving up, that too helps be a leader.
I would just say we are so lucky to have a mayor that is so sharp and so bright and so dedicated. No, I mean it. I'm older than, yeah. Really. I'm older than everyone up here, including the professor as well, I'm sure. And it is so refreshing to hear Denavia with her. Yeah, it's just very refreshing with her attitude and her focus and her self-confidence. And you know how sometimes you'll say, I'm a leader kind of, but I'm not even sure I deserve to be up here with them. But here's my point. Sometimes we're a leader and we're put in a leadership position that we didn't even know or we didn't think we'd get. And I'll just bring this real quick, easy for me to say real quick. I've been a judge for 27 years. You're elected. It's 6-year terms. I'm in my 5th 6-year term. So with my community events, I get out there, I give back, so people get to know you, not just from being in the courtroom. They get to know you and see you. One would think, well, okay, that's kind of the journey of being a leader. And it's funny because I talk to the media, I talk to groups, I speak to hundreds of groups all the time. I already told you I'm not worried or nervous about doing it. I think the biggest group I've ever spoken to is 1,000 people, and I loved it. A year ago, I was asked to be interviewed for something that I never thought I'd ever be interviewed for. And when Professor Chesley talks about courage, I married my partner of 27 years, who is a female, last year. Well, but this is it. So say for 27 years, the people that were close to you know, but even as an elected official, I never talked about being a gay woman. I never was out there saying it and not worrying about it. And with the changes that had been made and that the marriage equality law passed, there was no question that we wanted to be married. But when the media came to interview me the week of our wedding, I was completely panicked. And I'm not a panic kind of person. I'm a self-assured, strong, always there in charge, in control. And I'm like, well, is this news? Is this newsworthy? Like, look at all the other gay people that have come before me that didn't have opportunities or whatever. And because I'm a judge, because I'm an elected official, you want to. And then I thought, what if they take a spin on it that people are picketing our wedding? You're going to hell, or you're a loser, or whatever. You never know. With any of the faces I see right now, I have no idea whether I could sit down and say what I'm saying to you right now, that I married a woman. But I was on the television being interviewed the week of my wedding. Completely panicked, like, oh my gosh, I hope. But see, I couldn't not talk to the media, who's in my court every day for the fatal car accidents and the drunk driving and the domestic assault and something else bad. But never to ask me sitting at my desk about my personal life, about me marrying the person that I've loved for so long. And it was so unique because I thought to myself, I'm getting all these calls afterwards, and they did a nice story, and it wasn't bashing me. But he asked, like, do you think people will vote for you now that they know that? Because once you say it, baby, you don't take it back. Once you say it, you're out there, And I'm old enough where I had been quiet about it. I probably never sat down with Rosalind and said that ever. And we've been friends for years. I'm sure she knew. And she's always been kind and loving to me. But I never really sat down and said, I'm a gay woman. My point to you is that I started getting calls. Yeah, I felt like I was a bad lesbian. I didn't even know when the march was. They wanted me to speak at some march. I said, Gay Rights Pride March. I said, I must be a bad lesbian because I don't even know what month. I don't even know what month it is. I mean, seriously. But they're asking you to come and speak. In the Chamber of Commerce, we have a group, a club that Denavia would have started, Even though she's not gay, she would have said, let's have a gay club, But I remember saying to this media guy when he did the story, why? He said, why are you getting married? Well, one, it's legal now. Never was legal before. I marry people for a living. It's my job. I marry people all the time. District court judges, we marry them. We don't divorce them. We marry them. Circuit divorces them. We marry them. Finally, I could do it. I said, neither one of our churches. I'm Catholic. My spouse is Methodist. And we're both very faithful people. We've both been very committed to our churches. Neither of our churches would marry us. Even today, they wouldn't marry us. And we made that choice. But that leadership role, all of a sudden I felt like I was a leadership in the gay rights movement. And that wasn't even why. I was marrying Linda because I love her, And it is so funny that I can sit here now and say that. Her 94-year-old mother walked us down the aisle. And you think, you never thought your mother would ever. Mine didn't make it, but, they were deceased. But you just look at that and you think, now I'm speaking at Grand Rapids Community College and saying what I just said. You'd say it never would have happened. But it's because of the change and the leadership and the people who are caring and good and want equality for everyone. Anyway, that's that.
I love that.
So we're going in great directions here. I love this. I'm going to follow up on the courage angle, because I think that's so important. You've all clearly displayed courage. Who are some of your role models of courage?
Sarah. Judge Smolinski. I feel unbelievably blessed that I have been able to look up to so many really amazingly strong women. Even when I was growing up, my biggest cheerleader is my oldest sister, Renee. She believes so deeply in me, is always with me, has been my constant confidant, and And I truly, truly feel blessed that in this journey of life, I have had the opportunity to meet so many amazing women who I look up to. And truly, I'm not joking when I say Judge Smolinski is one of them. It's true. It's true. So my work, my background is social work. So I've known Judge Smolinski for probably 20 years. I've been able to work with her in the fields of both domestic violence and child welfare. And I can tell you what, she's amazing. She's a trailblazer, and she's an amazing judge. Now, she's also very humble, and she'll never say that. But I've been in her courtroom, and I see she's not only brilliant, which she is, and courageous, but she is kind. She treats every single person with dignity and respect, regardless of what they walk into her courtroom having to face. And that, to me, is a leader. And she never uses her position of power in a way that is inappropriate or self-serving. She is the epitome of a public servant. And so I have an opportunity to really see leaders like Judge Smolinski and other women. And quite frankly, when Judge Smolinski ran for the first time she ran, there were very few women running for office, running for judge. I mean, that's amazing. Look how many other women have stepped up since then. So we have women all over in this community. Mary Alice Williams, she was a city commissioner. And the first time I ran for city commission in 2005, she was right there with me, believing in me. She is still one of my greatest supporters today. And we have, Lynn Rabeau, she was a city commissioner before I served. Commissioner Kelly is an amazing leader. So we're so lucky in this community to have women to look to aspire to be like.
Thank you. Yeah, Ms. Mojay.
I think for me, my role models have kind of been, I guess from an early age, really my mom and my grandma. I think when I think back to why I am the way I am now, sometimes I am combative and I am strong-willed, I can be stubborn, but everything that I am kind of comes from what I saw growing up. My grandma had cancer 3 times, and she never, at any point in her bouts with breast cancer, she was never not optimistic. She always had faith. And she was so self-deprecating, and she was so humble. It was almost like my grandmother could go through anything, and she would still smile and say, oh, it's okay. Like, I'd be in the room, and they're like, we're going to biopsy you. It's going to hurt. And I would see that it would hurt her, and then she'd look at me and be like, oh, it's okay, because she didn't want me to know that it was hurting her. And it's just like those types of experiences made me feel like the women around me were so strong. When my parents divorced, my grandma made sure that my mom got the house directly across the street from her to help raise the 4 of us. And so I literally was a grandma's girl. Take 10 steps, I'm at grandma's front door. Stayed the night at grandma's house every day. Have a bedroom at grandma's house and my house. Like, that was really, and that's another reason why I never saw myself going into pageants. I spent way too much time in the garden, in dirt, and in trees with my grandma, because my grandma was one of 13 from Arkansas, and she was strong. And I saw that same strength in my mother as well. As a single mother for a lot of my childhood, my mom took on everything. And a lot of times when she would face things out in the community, not having a degree or, not being valued or, treated with respect, she would always come home and say, okay, sit down, listen. This is what I want you to do. I want you to learn how to do this. And I want you to get your degree for this reason. I need you to be, she took her experiences that she had wherever she was working, and she came home and she poured into us so that we wouldn't have to have them. And to me, that was strength. That was what I saw in terms of leadership. And then for a long part of my life, I think there was, even if I could speak to the lack of role models in some spaces, right? Like, when I was in high school, I was working at the global headquarters of Whirlpool, and it's right there in Benton Harbor, and I was working in the engineering lab, and I remember the engineers in the lab were just like, oh, well, you're hired as an intern to help out around here. You can do, like, some administrative stuff. And I was like, oh, well, cool. Can I actually go all over this headquarters? Like, I hear they're cooking like cookie dough in the KitchenAid lab. Can I go help them test brownies? Like, whatever that experience was like, I wanted to know everything. And they're like, well, you're a girl and you probably don't want to be in like the engineering stuff. If you want, you can help with like data. And I was like, oh, okay. So I went home and I was telling my grandma about this and stuff, and I had saved up my money and bought myself a laptop. We didn't have internet. I just literally opened the command prompt window, the little black box, and I got a book from the library on how to use it. And just like that, that summer I taught myself how to program. And it started with like MS-DOS and JavaScript, just with books. But then I would go to work and I told my boss, I've made a program that logs all the data for me. Can I go to the lab now? And he's like, oh yeah, sure. You're like, oh, okay, well you did that. And it became a thing where by the end of that summer, he was like, you know, you'll always have a job here in the engineering lab because we just are not used to interns that work this hard, that learn, that just believe that they can learn anything. And so I did. I came back the next summer, but I noticed that I was the only African-American female really in the engineering side of the headquarters. So there weren't very many at all. When I was back home in my community, there were no African-American women going into STEM fields in my church. There was no program really at my school that catered to engineering. And so I told my mom, I was like, I'm going to be an engineer. My mom's like, oh, great. But then I went off to college. You know, my parents didn't go to college. I didn't do college tours. My first time stepping on a college campus to go to school for classes full time, my parents were dropping me off in the UP at Michigan Tech University, 12 hours away. And I was terrified. And I had worked hard, got a presidential scholarship. I was a double major in computer engineering and electrical engineering. And that first year was so scary for me. I didn't know how to tell my parents that I did not feel ready for that I was the only African-American female in the incoming class, and that as a woman in computer engineering classes, every time I raise my hand, they look at me like, she has something to say? Like, how did she get here? And I went home that summer and I went back to Whirlpool. You know, I didn't tell my boss, he gave me a job again. And I told my grandma, I said, I'm not going back to Michigan Tech. I think I'm going to drop out of school because as a woman, as a black female, I just don't see role models. I don't see this working out for me. I really realized that I loved engineering because I could do it right here in Benton Harbor. I don't like going to school for this. And if I go through 4 more years miserable, I'll make good money, but I'm not going to love it. And my grandma told me, she said, you want to know a secret? I have breast cancer again. Don't tell your mom, don't tell your uncles, but don't do something that you're not going to be happy doing for the rest of your life. And I canceled my housing contract at Michigan Tech, and I drove to Grand Rapids and enrolled at GRCC to figure out what I wanted to do in my life. And the only person who knew I had moved here was my grandma. And so to me, she's always been my role model. She's been my inspiration. She's been the person who embedded leadership in me. And even though she passed away a couple years ago, I think all the things that I do today kind of stem from what I saw and who she was.
For sure. Bless her heart. I feel like I'm sitting next to Hidden Figures because this is it. If you honestly, no, if you
I
have
cried
not,
watching that movie.
If you have
I
not
bawled.
seen that movie, it is a must. I mean, it is a must. And it's so unbelievable that it took that many years to recognize them.
It's still hard for women today.
Oh, today. I mean, I was listening to Amy King. I don't know if she's still here from Shape, but, she goes to China to start their, it's a Grand Haven company, and they opened in China, and all the photographs, it's Amy, the only woman. Every photograph. You know that we're in that group. We all sat through that presentation. It was amazing. I think role models, they're ever evolving, really, they are. But I think that, and probably for, family has been such a huge part of our life, my life. When you have a mother that's had 10 of you, treated you all like she had one, that's how you felt. There's 9 girls in my family. My brother was the oldest, and then 9 daughters. I'm number 8, so I'm always one of the little kids. But both my parents, my dad was a judge. My brother became a judge. So I had the judge thing in the family, but none of my other sisters went into that field. They're all mothers. I'm not a mother. I've been called a mother. He got 30 days. I love getting that joke in there. I hope that's not bad for the mayor's thing. No, but I say being a parent is the biggest role you'll ever have no matter what. Any job you'll ever have. Now, not everybody's a parent, but my mom and dad, they always set the sky's the limit. You can do any, they believed in you, and that helped you believe in yourself. I already said that it's a large family, so there's a lot of cohesiveness there, and that helped a lot. We supported each other. But when I think of role models, I think of teachers I had in school. I had a lot of Dominican sisters. They were the Catholic nuns, I remember all the coaches I had that really helped shape me as the person that I am and on this journey. But now when I think about it, I've met, like, you'll have to look this up because you're also young, Anita Hill. I met Anita Hill in California at a conference. I met Sonia Sotomayor, one of the Supreme Court justices. Read both of their books. I mean, they probably have more than one book, but their autobiographies are fascinating. Like Sonia Sotomayor, I mean, she's growing up in the Bronx. As a child, her mother works all day. Her dad is a chronic alcoholic. She's insulin dependent diabetic, where she has to have shots. That back then you had to have shots. And her dad was, so chronically addicted to alcohol. He couldn't give her a shot. As a 7-year-old, she had to learn to give herself shots. She knew her folks were arguing about that. She knew if she could teach herself to give herself a shot, they wouldn't argue. Her dad died when she was like 9. I mean, look where she is. Her brother's a physician. They came from the inner city projects of total poverty. And when you see that people can do that, I mean, there's just a lot of blessings in the world. But I go back to what Rosalind was saying earlier, and Professor Chesley as well as speaking about treating each other with respect and courtesy. And I always focus on, how we treat. I had 35 third graders in court this week. They are so darling with their questions. I mean, the kids said, like, okay, they get marijuana, kind of, but, like, if it's illegal, why do they make it? They're darling, the questions they ask, and it just goes on and on. But, if you're courteous and kind to people, if you treat people with respect and courtesy, and you focus on our education, your grandma didn't want to say, stop going to school, but she wanted to say, do something that's going to make you happy. She knew you were sharp, smart. You'd go to school, you'll get your degrees, and you will, and you are. It's not, I didn't have to fit in at Michigan Tech. That didn't work. I get it. When I was running for office, I had some guy in Byron Center said women shouldn't be judges. Women shouldn't be judges. I didn't even want to give him my brochure. That's 38 cents wasted. Like, he's going to put it under his beer can when he goes back watching the ball game. I said, I respect the fact that you might not think women should be judges, but really women should be judges. We need a diverse bench, and not just white women. Not everybody looks like Bob Barker. You'll have to look that up because you don't know who he is. Not everybody looks like Bob Barker. You got to have a diversity. And women on the bench, we handle the entire population. Women are more than 50% of the population, or were at one point. I don't know now. Yeah, they are. So, I just said to that guy, thanks a lot for your time, left his house, walked across the front lawn, and I said, please, dear Jesus, let me win this election, and if I do, let that guy get caught speeding in East Grand Rapids. Just kidding.
Well, I would love for this audience to have at least a chance to ask a question of our panel. I told you this was going to be interesting. We deliver here at GRCC. So we have Art and Leah. Raise your hand, and they'll come around with a microphone. Question.
Go Raiders. Go Raiders.
Go
I'm a
Raiders.
Raider. Yeah.
Woo!
Go Raiders, baby.
Before the question, first, I want to say thank you for the fact that you went back to the internship that you were given, because as you said, we don't have a lot of representation in different fields, so thank you. That's not easy. But if you had a young lady one-on-one and she was ready to just give up, what would be the advice that you would tell her so that she would be able to make the stand that you made to make that difference and to keep struggling through, even though she's the only one of her that she sees?
Yeah, and to be quite transparent, I don't think it was much better deciding to leave engineering and pursue activism and politics. Aren't a lot of black women in that either. Actually, when I came to Grand Rapids, I attended the oath of ceremony for the first African-American female in the city commission, and that was just the past couple of years. So I don't think it necessarily meant I went into a field. There were plenty of role models and African-American women. That's not really the case, but I think when you're determining how you want to spend the rest of your life, right? Sometimes there are things you are so passionate about, the push is internal. You don't need external validation because you're fueled from what you already know in your heart that you need to be doing. And that doesn't require role models, that doesn't require necessarily the opportunities, because you know, and you don't need anyone else to tell you. I knew that no matter what, I mean, I was getting off work at Whirlpool, and I'm like, I gotta go hear Louis Farrakhan speak. I have a seat next to the mayor, and I have this, like, I was still doing political stuff in Ben Harbor. I had given up my crown, and I was still working on creating a better community. That's what I cared about. It was like what I was excited about in my day. I knew that I had responsibilities, like I need to make sure all my programs are running, or a motor in lab 3 just, caught on fire. My machine's in the burn building. I was comfortable in having those experiences. I thought that was cool, right? I got to tell my little brother, I got watched the washer blow up today. Like, it was pretty dope. So like that was cool to me. But what I was passionate about was really better in my community, seeing the world shift into the kind of place where my kids, I have a son, where his opportunities aren't restricted to what field he wants to go into or the color of his skin. And so for her, if she's trying to decide, do I want to smash through this glass ceiling or do I want to go somewhere else? You have to ask yourself that question, and for every single person, it's going to be different. I know that in politics, I will not be well received in every room. One, I'm not over 25, right? Like, they look at me and they're like, you are funny. You are talking to us. Why? Beauty pageant queen say what? Like, that's how I get treated in a lot of rooms. And it doesn't matter how smart I am, how brilliant, how much strategic planning I've done, how many books I've read, how many rooms I've walked into, how many politicians I've spoken to. I've met Jimmy Carter here at GRCC. I've met President Bill Clinton. And they won't care, because at the end of the day, I'm going to have to smash through some glass ceilings as a young African-American female in politics or in engineering or in healthcare or wherever I am. What determines whether or not you're willing to do that work is whether or not you're passionate about it. You have to decide if it's worth it for you.
And I like that she says the push from within, because I think believing in yourself, I think that's where the focus is for me a lot of times. When we have doubts or we have questions or we're going through a difficult thing, you've got to believe yourself, believe in yourself, and be true to yourself. Be true to yourself. And you see all the obstacles, all the hurdles, all the difficulties, but you cannot give up, because you are a role model for somebody else. When I'm talking to those third graders, those fourth graders, they're like, wow, I didn't, okay, a lady can be a judge. They see a police officer come in that's a woman police officer, and they haven't seen that before. They see so much, it opens up to them. So it's natural to feel like you're just fighting uphill, and you're trying to get uphill, and you got socks on and you can't even get uphill on an icy, slick road or whatever the journey is. But never give up, and never stop believing in yourself, because that passion from within, you have strength now that you don't even know you have. That's it.
I love that. I think that is probably the perfect ending to the discussion. You have strength you don't even know you have. Would you please all join me in thanking our panelists for a great discussion?